In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator on this Ford F-250 with the 5.4 liter V8 engine. Let's get started. Use an 8mm wrench or socket, and on the thread, the mounting nut that clamps down the negative battery terminal. Once you get it off a little bit, you should be able to spin it, pull it straight up and off of the terminal. Once you do that, inspect it for corrosion. This one has a little bit, but not too much. If it's severe, you might want to consider cleaning it and or replacing it. Set it aside on the side of the battery here so it can't jump back and make connection while we're working. We're going to have to remove this intake piece here so we can get more access to the alternator. If you have this hose that goes over, remove it, and you don't have to disconnect it on either end, you just have to push it aside. There's going to be an 8mm clamp here that you have to loosen up in order to remove the intake off of the air box. Just loosen it up a few turns. You should be able to pull this off. There we go. Get this hose out of the way. And then on the other end of this, you'll see another clamp. Mine's a little bit hidden down there, but 8mm also. Loosen that up. With both of these loosened up, you'll be able to remove this piece and set it aside. Now we're going to have to remove the belt, get a 1/2-inch drive breaker bar or long ratchet. You need some leverage, basically. Stick it into the end of the tensioner where the cutout is, and then pull clockwise on it. That's going to remove tension. I'm just going to slip it off of this idler because it's the easiest one to take it off of, and it fell off the alternator too. That's fine. So at this point, you can either leave your tool in here, leave the belt hanging, or remove both, whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it like this because all we're doing is removing the alternator from up here. Let's remove the main power wire off of the alternator. Pull this boot off, and with a 10mm socket, loosen up the mounting nut that holds this on, and remove the mounting nut completely. Set that aside, remove the wire, and then we'll have two more connectors over here to disconnect before the whole harness can come off of here. So one is going to be this larger one down here. You'll need a pocket screwdriver to kind of pry the tab away. It has a hook that hooks down in, and it won't come undone until you pry it away. So try to get it in there. It needs to be small, but you do need a little bit of leverage on it. So you could also do it with a pick if that's all you have. As you can see, that's what the tab looks like. And then this one is basically the same but backwards and a lot smaller. Also doable with a pick. There we go. Try not to break these. Check for corrosion. This one has a little bit of corrosion in there, but you can clean that up with a wire brush. A lot of times these do end up corroding because the wires are kind of out in the open here. Now use a 10mm socket and remove the 4 bolts that hold this bracket on top of the alternator. Remove the bracket, set it aside. 2 10mm bolts on the bottom of the alternator. You'll need either an extension or a deep socket for these so you can clear the water pump. Just break them free. You don't have to remove these all the way. Just back them out a few turns. The alternator is slotted on the bottom, so it'll just slide right up and out. So at this point, grab the alternator and pull it straight up and out. There it is. Get the new alternator, slide it down into position, get it over those 2 bolts, and let's tighten them up. As you tighten these, you'll see the alternator start to push up against the engine block. We will be torquing these in a second. I just want to make sure that the alternator is fully seated. You want to make sure it is seated where it's supposed to be, because the belt, if it's not lined up perfectly, can actually skip a tooth or wear itself out over time prematurely. So that's important. The torque for these is going to be 18 foot-pounds. That's 1 and 2. If you don't have the means to torque this, just make it nice and snug by hand with a decently sized ratchet. You want those to be nice and tight because those are the main anchor bolts for the alternator. The bracket on top is just to kind of support it at the top. Let's get the bracket back on the top, line it up with all 4 bolts, and then all of these bolts are actually the same, so you don't have to worry about keeping them in the same order. Just thread all of them down in by hand. Okay, get all of them started. If you're having trouble starting these at the top, sometimes these brackets don't line up perfectly if you have the bottom bolts tightened up, so loosen those up, position the alternator however you need to, and then line up the top bolts. Having said that, mine are all in, so let's snug them all up. The torque on these top ones is 89 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. If you don't have something that goes that low, just snug them up by hand. All right, those are tight. Let's get the wires reconnected. Let's get the wires reattached. We'll start with the connector that's furthest away. Clip that on. Clip on the little one. Make sure they actually click into place. And then the main power wire that comes off of the stud over here. Peel that boot back. Sand it down if it has corrosion. Mine's okay, so good to reuse it. Put the new mounting nut on. The torque for this is 89 inch-pounds as well. If you can't torque it with anything that low, just make it nice and snug by hand with a small ratchet or a small wrench. You don't want to over-tighten this because you can break the stud internally in the alternator. That would not be good. Also make sure that this wire goes through this cutout here on the plastic. Just like that. Even at 89 inch-pounds like you saw, it was starting to twist, so definitely don't go any more than that. And cover this up with the boot, which should prevent water and debris from getting in there. And then my wiring harness had this little clip here that wasn't clipped on before, but I'm going to clip it back on just so it can stay nice and secure. Just like that. Perfect. All right, I got my tool in there already. I'm going to pull tension off of it. The belt is still positioned on all of the other pulleys. Now, I will check it. I got caught on here, so pay attention to that. It is one tooth off of the power steering, so I'm going to fix that. You want to make sure it's sitting flat on all of the pulleys. We got AC, idler, alternator, water pump, tensioner, and harmonic balancer. Everything looks perfectly fine. So I'm going to remove my tool, give it one last look over. If it's off one tooth, even just a little bit, it's actually going to get cut as the engine runs, and that would not be a good thing. Having said that, we're good to go. Let's move along. Let's get this piece back on. Make sure when you slide it over this throttle body adapter plate here, it doesn't get kinked. You want it to slide over nice and smooth. Perfect. All right, slide this back on this end. Make sure this hose stays above. Snug this clamp up, 8mm socket. When you tighten these up, if you tighten the clamp and you can't move this anymore, that's plenty tight. Even if the clamp can keep tightening, don't, because it'll strip it out. Resecure the hose and then tighten up the clamp on the other end. There we go, that's nice and tight. Everything is sealed up, everything's reconnected. Reconnect the negative battery terminal. You might see a little spark and hear some clicking. That's normal as the battery gets reconnected. And I'm going to snug this up. Now, once you tighten it and you get to basically the snug point, try spinning it. If you can still spin it like this, it is not tight enough. So continue tightening it, but if you over tighten it, you'll actually stretch the terminal. As you can see right now, I can't spin it anymore. So even though I could keep tightening it, I'm going to stop. This is connected properly. And there you have it, job is done.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.